What's up, friendos? This is video number 5 in my series on music and AI. In the previous video, I said that essentially what these models are doing is they're compressing knowledge. Emad Mostak, the former CEO of Stability AI, said that knowledge is compression. It was a really profound statement. We're ingesting so many petabytes of data in any one moment, we can't process it all, we filter it out, but it all gets in there one way or another. And over your lifetime, there's exabytes of data crammed into the gray matter of your skull. What happens when you compress something is you're basically grabbing onto the most essential elements, the qualitative attributes of the information. All of these things, we're talking about a large language model, a convolutional neural network, variable autoencoders, the various different architectures of AI that are driving some of the products out there, whether you're talking about things that generate words, you're talking about AI that generates sounds, you're talking about AI that generates either still images or video. They're all essentially different flavors of what's called a neural network. Now, what a neural network is, not too dissimilar from the brain. It's layers and layers and layers of many computational nodes per layer. What's a computational node? Don't worry about it too much. Just think of it as like a switch or a gate that takes an input, applies sort of a mathematical operation to it, and then sends an output to other nodes in the network. What you have is a system, many layers of comprised of many individual computational nodes, switches or gates, and basically these are all connected to each other in every kind of permutative way. And as data moves through this thing, these little switches toggle and capture some kind of essential qualitative information. Another way you can think of it, if you're talking about words, you're talking about a large language model, a neural network that's basically compressing all the words in the world. Imagine it like a word cloud. You've got a three-dimensional word cloud, literally like a globe of words, many different words. Let's say this particular word cloud just is about animals. And in this word cloud, if you zoomed in, you'd find a little node here, and this one was devoted to the word horse. And you zoomed in, and you saw this one was devoted to the word pig. You discover that in this area of the word cloud were all the sort of the hooved animals, let's say. And if you zoom down here, you'd see fur, and then maybe you'd see next to fur, you'd see the word feather. The point is that what these systems do is they tend to capture information about a topic or subject or everything and organize it in a multi-dimensional space. I'm talking about just a three-dimensional word cloud, but the reality is that these large language models are multi-dimensional, n-dimensional, sometimes have thousands of dimensions. So whatever kind of information you're pushing through it, it's not just grabbing, let's say for words, it's not just grabbing, is it a verb, is it a noun, but also or an adjective, but it's also determining, what is the gender of the word, the sentiment of the word. So in music theory, there's an old acronym, SHMRG, which stands for sound, harmony, melody, rhythm, and growth. Those are just like a couple attributes of musical sound. So these models are capturing thousands of attributes of musical sound. And so when you prompt a model that's used by a company like Udio or Suno or whatever, you're basically asking the model to unpack that compressed data. I think some folks can readily recognize when something is still compressed, or at least a little bit compressed, or whether it's still somehow distilled too much. But that encoding process is getting better, and the unpacking process, the decoding process is getting better. The models are getting more parameters, so they're trained on more data, so they're able to capture more dimensionality of the material that they're trained on, and our ability to basically get them to unpack that is getting better as well. The bit rate for most recorded audio is 44,100, so one way of dealing with the WAV files that you scrape off the web, they take up a lot of storage. We're talking about massive amounts of storage, massive amounts of compute necessary to compress all that data. So there might be an intermediary step, I'm not certain, where you might convert it from, say, a WAV file to spectrographic data, which is a kind of compression, pre-compression you might call it. So there's many ways of dealing with it, but just know that what you're doing is you're taking all of the WAV files, you're teasing them apart, you're pumping them through this layered network. This basically is capturing many different, almost unknowable for a human mind, attributes of the sound, features of the sound, And then data scientists will go and they'll play with some of the configuration values for the model such that they'll get increasingly better output from the model when the model is prompted to unpack the data. But AI has been involved in music for a long, long time. Check out the work of David Cope at UC Santa Cruz. I think he's retired now, but he was one of the early proponents of artificially generated music. You've got music identification and classification with companies like Shazam, Songview. Some of these companies have been around for a long, long time. And music recommendation, which is used not only like by Pandora, but like Amazon Music and many, many other music aggregators now. Those things have all been around and all driven in part by some aspect of artificial intelligence or machine learning, because now we have the compute to deal with such massive amounts of data. The compute and the storage capacity to deal with massive amounts of data, and that's what's making what we're hearing now today possible. But it's been a long time coming. This wasn't like a sudden overnight thing. Like I said, I've been talking about it for a real long time. I think since '95. So that's AI at a very high, very basic level, at sort of just an introductory level. You can say that it's all probabilistic, that all we're seeing is just the simulation of human thought, driven by statistics to a certain extent. The weird thing about AI is it exhibits these what are called, emergent abilities. There's a lot of speculation. There's been stuff going around for years where people will say, this pitch here is the one that stimulates the pineal gland, or something to that effect, or this one's going to, detoxify your kidneys, and this is a lot of hogwash, because when you see a soprano sing and there's a wine glass and the wine glass shatters, the soprano singing a very specific frequency that resonates with a very specific mass and material from a specific distance and amplitude. All that stuff is very, 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 very individual. There's no universal about this pitch is going to have the same impact on everybody or everybody's organ. My pineal gland is not going to be the same exact mass of somebody else's pineal gland. The thickness of my skull through which that sound wave has got to penetrate is not the same for everybody. So anybody that tells you, like this is the pitch, or this is the, this music is somehow going to impact your body a specific way, that's a stretch. It's a little bit of a stretch scientifically. Even so, there might be something to that, right? Like we're finding all kinds of weird things through AI. Like perhaps you can actually diagnose somebody's health through their iris. Well, iridology has been around forever, and it's been considered quack science by medical doctors for generations. But now through AI, we're starting to see, it has this incredible pattern recognition that indeed you can basically identify certain illnesses just through the iris of the eye. So to say that there isn't some kind of pattern of musical sound that may generally affect the human body in a particular way, I'm not saying that. But if somebody says this specific pitch on the piano, it's going to do something for you, it's a bit of a stretch. But I know that. Nonetheless, I'm still fascinated by the topic. So I asked the AI, what do you know with regard to frequencies and their impact on the human body? And AI just refused to talk to me about it. Like, I can't tell you about that. Why? Well, because that's quack science. It didn't just argue at the point with me. It almost got mad at me. So there are weird things like that going on, things that maybe not necessarily been programmed into the AI in a explicit sense, but somehow emerge as a result of all the data it has access to. And somehow that opinion got compressed into the data set, into this multi-layered system. You only pump the only words you pump through it are, let's say, Swahili. It might have the ability to suddenly speak and translate Bengali. That's really weird, because somehow as a result of maybe the very high level structural architectural aspects of the language itself, it understands language at a meta level that it can kind of apply those principles to other languages that aren't even in its data set. That's really weird. To the matter of whether or not AI is creative. Look, if you're a human being and you go on a trail and you see a hawk, and then you come home and you're impressed by the flight of this hawk gliding, in the stratosphere, and you write a song about it called Bird of Prey, you are prompted in some way. By nature, an event in nature, you're prompted to think of that subject matter and inspired to create a song about it. Maybe it was an eagle, and then time keeps on slipping. So the point is that artists seldom work and create something straight out of a vacuum. They're usually inspired by something, by a break, like every pop song is about, a breakup or a fantasy wedding or whatever. So humans are prompted to think about a topic and then find a way to express it in music all the time. It's been going on forever. Very few humans start with a blank slate. They get, they get through some kind of meditative, exercise, get themselves into a state of no mind, and then begin creating. So to say that what AI is doing is not creative or imaginative, I disagree. I think it's operating very much the same way that humans do. You give it a prompt and then it rolls with that prompt. The difference is that we get our prompts directly through our sensory faculty, through our eyes, our nose, our mouth, our ears, our touch. And increasingly with embodied AI, with androids, they'll be likewise getting data directly through sensory mechanisms, which may be inspiring them to create in various sorts of ways. So I would say be cautious about making the assertion that there's no real imagination or creativity happening there. And when you're working with any of the tools that you're used to working with, a DAW, whether you're talking about Ableton or, any kind of software, Serum, whatever it is, this is just a graphic user interface on top of code. And, I think it's an abstraction layer itself. Those utilities, those tools, those softwares are an abstraction layer on top of code, which is an abstraction layer on top of sound. So if you want to get really creative with AI, and you don't want to just use Suno or Udio and unpack a semi-still compressed version of the work of other people, if you want to really start fresh, realize that you can get AI to generate code, and that code can generate sound. So unburden yourself from the DAW. There's nothing you can't do. There's anything you can do in Ableton, you can do in straight code, right? Even syncing, all that stuff, it's just an abstraction layer on top of very powerful code. But you can get the AI to write the code. So you don't need the abstraction layer of the DAW anymore. You don't need the abstraction layer of predetermined sound libraries if you can create any sound you want. You might want the acoustic properties of a sound that's been recorded and stolen from an instrumentalist or singer or whatever. But, stolen, they basically sold their goods, for pennies on the dollar, which was foolish for most instrumentalists to do. Sound libraries, in truth, are another kind of disintermediation. They're disintermediating the musician from the recording studio. So any instrumentalist or vocalist that's has recorded a sound library, I get it. We all got to pay rent. I've been there, brother. But the reality is, when you do that, you are basically putting yourself out of a job in the future. I think it was Elvis Costello, perhaps, who said, talking about music is like dancing about architecture, but sometimes big paradigm shifts in music require a little bit of explanation. I think Berlioz published a whole sort of exegesis, with regard to the narrative of the Symphonie Fantastique. So bear with me for a few minutes when I talk about my own piece. If you can sort of let go of your need for all of those things and think about music creation from truly from first principles, not just from first principles of music, but first principles of AI, and not constrain yourself to that graphic user interface of Ableton or your VST plugins or whatever library you're using, and just think about sound in its rawest, most descriptive, both in terms of acoustics and music theory in its most descriptive terms, and compose that way directly in your mind, then if you can put that into words, you can tell a large language model, you can really describe the sound accurately. You have a very rich and dimensional abstraction layer. Then what the AI can do is serve as the translation between your words and the code that generates that sound. And now you don't need a DAW anymore. And I'll show you how I did that in the next video.